Hey everyone, I just want to make a quick video just discussing Assassin's Creed Shadows and the stock issues that Ubisoft is now facing because of that game and Star Wars Outlaws. So if we take a look at their stock, currently it's sitting at around $11 a share. It was sitting at about $115 a share in 2018, so that was its all-time high. It's down 85% in 5 years, however. I don't really see how they can recover financially. At this point, they're so far down, it's looking like they won't be able to recover from where they are. And even if they get back on the right track, start making good games again, I doubt they can produce any of those games before they run out of money. So right now, they are in one of their worst financial situations they've ever been. They've just released Star Wars Outlaws last month, and that game was a financial failure. The game was an absolute disaster, filled with bugs, filled with many different issues. So that game has caused them many problems, which they said they will try and fix. They recently released a statement, which I don't think realistically they're ever going to be able to get this game back to where they want it to be. No matter if they fix it or not, it's not going to bring back people to buy the game. People will pick it up on sale maybe a year from now for £10, £15, but realistically they're not going to be purchasing it for the full price within the next few months. That's just not going to happen. The game has completely embarrassed itself and the company. So their recent statement, they said, while Assassin's Creed Shadows is feature complete, the learnings from Star Wars Outlaws release led us to provide additional time to further polish the title. So they've apparently learned from Star Wars Outlaws in the space of a month that they needed to delay Assassin's Creed Shadows. And I don't think it's really that they've learned from Star Wars Outlaws in the sense that they're going to try and make the game better. They've just realised how much they've messed up with that game and that it's been an absolute financial disaster. And they probably don't want to have two financial disasters within such a short period of time. Obviously, if they've got two massive games like this come out in 2024, and both of them are huge financial disasters, that is going to look incredibly bad for their company. But if they release another one in 2025, which is a financial disaster, which it's likely Assassin's Creed Shadows will be, it's not going to look as bad for their company. So Assassin's Creed Shadows is going to release in 2025 February, which is actually Black History Month. So that's kind of funny that they're releasing a game about a black samurai in Black History Month. So that's always going to be fun to see the reactions to that. But ultimately, Assassin's Creed Shadows isn't going to be able to escape the controversy that's surrounding the main characters. Obviously, they've chosen to go with a historical figure, Yusuke, and make him the main character in the story. They've also chosen to make him a samurai, when it's very much disputed whether or not he was a samurai. Most of the evidence that we've seen appears to point to him being a retainer for a shogun, not a samurai. So the question is the controversy around him as a main character justifiable enough for this game to sort of be boycotted to the point where it is a financial disaster? And I think that it quite frankly is. The game that they've chose to release is clearly one that they're pushing more of a message on the fans rather than trying to make a game that people will enjoy. They don't really seem to care at this point whether or not people enjoy the games, they just want to push a message. They've had many years to make a game set in Japan, and they've finally chosen to release one, and they've made it around a black man, which is insulting to people from Japan. It's insulting to black people to try and make it out that this guy would blend in so seamlessly with feudal Japan. If I was to play this game in a realistic fashion, I would expect every single citizen that I walk past in Japan to be staring at me, because this would be, or for almost every single person in Japan at that time, their first experience seeing a black man. And they would have no idea what they're seeing. It would be such a jarring experience. There was no internet back then. There was nothing to show what people looked like from other countries. When white men first landed there, it was very interesting to see the experience that they had when it came to meeting such a different people. They hadn't seen us before, we hadn't seen them before. It would have been a surreal experience, because obviously when you only see people who look like you, the same skin colour, similar features, and then all of a sudden you see these people arrive and they look completely different to you, whether it's Yusuke who came, who was supposed to be much taller than the average Japanese man, much bigger, much stronger, and then obviously very different facial features. He would stand out to them like a sore thumb. That shouldn't be something that they could just pretend isn't going to exist in the game. But we've seen footage from the game, and obviously he walks through the town in some of the footage, and we can quite clearly see that that isn't a feature in the game. They're not going to be looking at him. They're not going to be staring. There's not going to be any pointing fingers. And obviously they're not going to do that because that would be racist in a game today, even though it's just historically realistic. And to me, I think that would be quite immersion breaking for a lot of people to play a game set in the 1500s, and it's the first black man in Japan who would really stand out to the citizens of Japan. And the fact is, that's not something that we need to shy away from. Just portray the game as it would be. But moving on from Assassin's Creed Shadows and all the controversies that surround it, one of the biggest problems that Ubisoft has been having with their games over the last few years is that they find a few different features that work quite well, and then they keep repeating it over and over and over, to the point where people become completely desaturated with the content and uninterested. So at the moment, Ubisoft hasn't really innovated at all when it comes to newer games, and they've also released one of the biggest disasters in gaming history for quite some while. Star Wars Outlaws was absolutely one of the biggest failures that Ubisoft have put out in a long time. They did have the Skull and Bones game, which released earlier this year as well, which was a disaster. It was originally titled as a quadruple A game, one of the first of its kind, and then that's completely faded into obscurity. I didn't actually know the game had released until a couple of weeks ago. That's how poor that game was received. So if we're looking at the last few years of games that Ubisoft have put out, and comparing that alongside with their stocks, we can see that their stocks have only gone down, and the quality of the games has also only gone down. They also released the Avatar game last year, which originally looked very promising, and then the closer and closer it got to release and the more that fans saw, we saw that it was just basically a Far Cry Primal ripoff, and didn't look to have any sort of originality to it at all, even though it had such a strong foundation to pull off from Avatar, the movies. Given how much they made at the box office, it should have been a hit. But Ubisoft has gotten so lazy and complacent with just looking at which games have worked well for them in the past, keep taking the same gameplay features from every game and implementing it into the next one. But now let's compare Ubisoft's stock to EA's, a competitor of theirs. So if we're looking at EA's current stock, over the last 5 years, they have gone up around 50% in their stock value, whereas Ubisoft has gone down 85%. Both companies are putting out terrible games of similar quality, but obviously EA has got it down to a much finer art. They're putting out these constant sports games every single year. They have so many different microtransactions in them that consumers are still currently willing to pay for. So although both EA and Ubisoft are pretty terrible companies and haven't really aspired to put out many great games over the last few years, EA has been succeeding, whereas Ubisoft has only been failing. And at this point where we are with the games, they have clearly been interjecting their own political messages into them. That's very apparent with the most recent Assassin's Creed Shadows game. It's been apparent in the Rainbow Six Siege series for a few years, where they've been implementing gay characters into the game and trans characters in a game which is just a shooter. There's no reason for us to know the sexuality of any of the characters in that game, but for some reason they have been pushing it on that game. And the fans are beginning to notice that there is clear political messages in these games, and they are no longer wanting to participate in them as they used to. Is that some of their staff will take to Twitter and they will begin to argue with the fans and tell them that the games aren't made for them, and if they don't like it, don't buy it, and if they don't like it, go make a game of their own. And when they say these things to their fans, it puts off so many other people who would buy the game, because they see the arrogance of these developers and they just get resentful and they don't want to participate in these companies anymore. So they really need to limit more what their staff can say online about these games, have better PR teams in place who stop them from talking about this stuff, because it just damages them in the long term. But if we take a look at their most recent statement they made as well in regards to Assassin's Creed Shadows, and they're not pushing political messages, we can see what they have to say. So the statement reads, "I want to reaffirm that we are an entertainment first company, creating games for the broadest possible audience, and our goal is not to push any specific agenda. We remain committed to creating games that everyone can enjoy." Now I think Ubisoft have so much bad faith at this point that no one's going to believe that statement, and no one cares about that statement anymore. It's just at the point now where most fans are just fed up. They just want to get a good product and not have the propaganda clearly shoved in their face. Fans just want to play video games, enjoy them, and shut their brain off for a couple of hours and take themselves out of the real world. But these developers always insist on trying to push this stuff down our throats while we're just trying to have fun. So the question is now, what is likely to happen when Assassin's Creed Shadow releases? It's set to release a few months from now, and when that game does drop, it's likely that their stock will also drop once more. There's no way that the amount of people who purchase this game will equal the budget of this game. Once the stocks drop once more, it's likely that the company could be facing bankruptcy due to the lack of income. And if that does happen, what does that mean for Ubisoft? Could mean a few different things. Perhaps they could get bought up by a company like Microsoft. If that does happen, that would be quite a shame, because honestly Microsoft haven't put out any good games in the last few years. If we take a look at some of the companies they've bought, you've got the Gears of War franchise, the Halo franchise, which were the biggest franchises on the Xbox 360. Absolutely massive games they were, and then once they were brought up by Microsoft and then they started producing the games for the Xbox One, the games just went downhill. And they're not really thought of like they used to be, and it's unlikely that the new Gears of War game that's going to be coming out is going to bring back the original fan base. So the other option for Ubisoft is they might have to liquidate the company and sell off their IPs to make some of the money back. If that does happen, hopefully Assassin's Creed goes to a good company that can fix it, but I doubt they can recover that franchise at this point. So we may now be at the stage where we just have to put our faith in new developers to continue making better games. We have Ghost of Tsushima, and we also have Black Myth Wukong, which recently came out. Two fantastic games, which have really got fans excited for the future of those companies. And then we've also had the recent success of Helldivers 2 and Space Marine 2. Although Helldivers 2 has stumbled a few times since then, it does seem to be back on the up. Other companies like Ubisoft should be looking to these companies and seeing what they're doing right and trying to mimic that, because fans don't want constant microtransactions. We just want to have a good game when we get on our consoles or PCs. We don't want to be preached to, we just want to enjoy the content that we're playing, and that's it. I really hope Ubisoft do learn from their mistakes with Assassin's Creed and the recent Star Wars. I doubt they will, and I imagine that they will only continue to go downhill from here. But if they do get back on the right trajectory, I do wish them all the best and that they can get out of the financial pit that they're currently in. But I very much doubt that's going to happen. I think it is more likely that we will see Ubisoft go down under soon. Anyway, that's just my thoughts on the video. Let me know what yours are below.